Things happen, Mike.
Yeah.
Okay.
So. This is a regular meeting of the Fairhaven Planning Board. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given pursuant to the provisions of the Open Public Meetings Act. At the time of the board reorganization in January of this year, the board adopted its regular meeting schedule for the year. Notice of the schedule was sent to and published in the Asbury Park Press on January 31st, 2025, and the Few River Times on January 23rd, 2025. That notice was also posted on the bulletin board in Borough Hall and has remained continuously posted there as required by the statute. A copy of the notice is and has been available to the public and is on file in the office of the Borough Clerk. A copy of the notice has also been sent to members of the public as have requested such information in accordance with the statute. Adequate notice having been given, the board secretary is directed to include this statement in the minutes of this meeting. And so we'll start with a roll call and then pledge of allegiance.
Here.
Mr. Holton,
Here.
Mr. Newell,
Here.
Mr. Mayala,
Here.
Mr. Rob,
Here.
Mr. Nika, Mrs. Antonin,
Here.
Mr. Anderson,
Here.
Mr. Bailey,
Here.
Great, so I'll just start with the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, so we have a few things, a few administrative items on the schedule tonight. There's no old business or new business that is on the schedule. We were gonna have our planner come and discuss the estimates for the master plan reexamination. He sent late notice that his partner was admitted to the hospital this evening, and so he sent a draft of what he was gonna present. But I'm only finding out this now. So that was about an hour and a half ago, that was sent. And so what I'm gonna do is go back tonight and read that draft and then have it distributed to the full board. And then we do have a master plan subcommittee constituted, which can meet off schedule and just discuss, but we'll kind of keep that ball rolling between now and the next meeting. We will also take time, obviously, the continuing discussion of the master plan reexamination. You know, if anybody has any matters to bring before the board or wants to talk about anything as we move forward, we can spend some time on that because we now have the time to do it, unfortunately. So with no old business or new business, we'll jump right to the administrative items and start with the approval of the January 21st, 2025 meeting minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Mrs. Bush,
Yes.
Mr. Holton,
Yes.
Mr. Newell,
Yes.
Mr. Bailey,
Yes.
Mr. Rob,
Yes.
Yes.
and Mrs. Antonin.
Yes.
So the other matter on the schedule tonight is the facilities update. And so Councilman LaBarbera is here. Just as a quick refresher, I think over the last 24 months, we've had two major items come up through the planning board with regards to the borough's facilities. And the police station in particular and the DPW site. And so Councilman LaBarbera is here to give us an update. So take it away.
Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Good evening. After Chief McGovern could be
Yeah.
here.
Terrific.
And obviously, Rich Cardell has taken a huge role throughout all of this. So I prepared a presentation just to kind of set the framework. We're going to kind of go through it and thought it really was a critical moment to provide a status update of kind of where things stand. And then also what the next really 3 to 5-ish months looks like. So gonna jump right into it unless there's any additional questions. All right, sweet. So I'm gonna come over here and just point. Go to the next slide. Okay, so little agenda, we're gonna come back to two key dates, just for background, right? So this isn't the same planning board that we briefed, 2 years ago now. And then gonna go into updates specific to the police department, the community center, DPW, and then we'll end with Fish Chapel, which is the parking lot. And I'll level set where things stood the last time we talked and bring up to speed as of today. Next slide. Okay, so for background, we had a special meeting, if you recall, the health and safety issues that were present in the previous police department building. It caused for us to move in an expedited manner. So in April of 23, we had a special meeting. We had Rick Adelson here, Frank Lear, site engineer, Eli Goldstein, the architect. And ultimately what came out of that was the letter that Mr. Kovacs produced that articulated the planning board's support for the project. There were multiple different pieces of feedback that the planning board provided over the years. Parking considerations, site considerations, lighting considerations, and then the new design, right, is really the 7th or 8th iteration at that point. All of those considerations were taken into account. 20 June, so fast forward a few months, during a regularly scheduled meeting, that's when we came and presented on the DPW. So you had Joe Rafferty for Collier Engineering Design, Ron Grammer was the architect, and all of this was predicated on the work with the TDRC, right? So per our statutes, Technical Design and Review Committee is the overarching body. It's almost like a subcommittee within the planning board. And Doug, keep me honest here. So when you have capital review projects, you work with the TDRC back and forth. So that was Jimmy Newell, there was Rich Gardella, there were a few other folks involved with that. But ultimately, both of these planning board meetings were predicated on weeks, if not months, of work back and forth at the TDRC level.
Your color commentary on that?
I mean, you feel free.
Just very briefly, the TDRC, for folks who are not familiar with it, it allows you really to get into the reeds of pipe dimension, all of those things, conduit, so that that detail, that level of detail doesn't have to bog the board down. And when it comes up to the board, you can have confidence if it's come out of the TDRC that if you will, the guts are good, the skeleton is good, it's sound. We've really vetted this out. Now, planning board members, do what you do best. Take a look at the plan, take a look at circulation, take a look at design, give the opportunity for the hearing for the public to come in and be heard there, and then move the project forward. It saves you it saves you probably a meeting and a half, and you can really get through your review, probably two meetings top if everything is done.
Yeah, spot on. And, throughout that process, right, there were multiple open houses. There were multiple different types of professionals engaged, environmental, solar, site, you name it. We didn't leave any rock unturned because of the significance of what these projects resemble for the borough of Fairhaven. Next slide. So let's start with the DPW. And again, you have this in front of you, so if you wanna look as you go. So I'll come to some key data points, but I'll tell you what you're looking at. So on the bottom is Allen, left side is Third, top side is Maple, right? Those are the three sides. By quick way of background, the biggest issue that concerned the DPW, right, was that it's an industrial site in a residential area. So everything that we did, everything that we were looking at was focused on how do we mitigate that to the best of our ability, whether it was the lighting that was selected. There was an initial fence, so right here, parallel with Third Street is fence. One of the things that we did was we moved this fence 40 feet in, so it used to be out here, and we moved it 40 feet this way to shrink the site. We wound up with a couple unforeseen circumstances at the DPW. So in this vicinity right here, there was a 10-inch concrete slab. And so back in the day, so 70s and 80s, 90s, they used to do all the salting operations, and they built this out to support all the heavy duty trucks. We didn't realize that until they started ripping up the asphalt. The reason that's important is because a key goal here was stormwater infrastructure, right? And so there was a tremendous amount of stormwater infrastructure that took place in this area, specifically around this catch basin. I'm using the right term, Rich. That we had to do. So that was one change order. The other change order, so if you recall, we went through a very rigorous residential process, right? And we really wanted to gain the feedback of the residents. So we spent a lot of time on the design of the fence, right? We spent a lot of time on the design of the landscaping. We had to balance fiscal responsibility, right? We can't plant, 12-inch caliber trees here and achieve an effect that only takes 10 years right away because of the costs. So with that being said, we worked with two different landscape architects out of Colliers. We worked with our own CTE, right? Sherry Sparrow, and ultimately came up with a landscaping design. What you're seeing here, the other major unforeseen was on Maple Avenue. There was around, I can't remember the exact number, 13, 15 trees that, when they planted them, they put a strap around the base, right? And they have like the 4 wires that go out so it grows up straight. You're supposed to take that off after a certain amount of time. If you don't, you actually strangle the tree. And as it grows, if it's a windy storm, it's gonna snap. So we had to take out more here and actually redesign the entire landscaping buffer. So we met with the folks on Maple Avenue, ultimately came up with a design. So that's what you're seeing here. So you're seeing the full landscaping design around, you're seeing the street trees here, pushes 40 feet in. These two here, just so you get to know, is the stormwater infrastructure. The goal was to make any stormwater runoff off of the building a net zero. It's very hard to make water disappear. That's the term that they use with me because I don't understand all the other reduction pieces and everything. But we spend a tremendous amount of time looking at residential area versus industrial site, whatnot. Where we're spending a tremendous amount of time now, tremendous, because there's 3 items left on the punch list, before they move back in, is at the recycling center, and the operational management here. The goal is actually to hire a part-time, DPW employee that would man the recycling center on Saturdays. So it's going through a significant operational overhaul. So just a quick flavor of background and kind of some of the key changes that occurred since the last time we were here. And really it was landscaping, one, and it was this area here too. The other interesting unforeseen, just to really round it out, is you have sheathing that goes up the side of the building, right? It's plywood. And so when the initial assessment was done, they said, whatever, they did like 2 feet, 6 feet, 8 feet, whatever scopes, and they saw that there was sheathing. So like, great, this is fantastic. Sheathing stopped at 8 feet. So that was another unforeseen where there was a lot, like thousands of square feet of sheathing that we had to do in order to make sure that the building had the right infrastructure. So, next slide. So some key data points. Punch list in progress, 3 items left. The fuel tank. So if you know that we house our own fuel tanks on site, part of the project was to replace them. So the demo concluded Monday.
Well, tank for today.
Oh, fantastic. So now they'll start putting the new tanks in. All the DPW furniture, workstations are installed. So once the punch list is done, right, and we take ownership of the building back, then we'll be able to get in predicated that the CO is finalized, which I believe it is. We'll confirm tomorrow. Really important, just want to double down on that. You don't want to take a building over too prematurely because the minute you do, you own anything that's in there. So Rich, Nick Perchinsky, the owner's rep, Chris York have been really taking their time, making sure that every single item, it's not all black and white. There is some gray, right? You have practicalities and field conditions, but nonetheless, making sure that when we accept that building back, we're moving in at 100% and there's no questions asked. The off-site Maple Avenue project. So when we came to the planning board and we briefed the DPW project, part of the bid as an alternate was improving Maple Avenue, right? So sidewalks, curbing, streets. This started way before the project because originally
Between Third and Hendricks.
Third and Hendrickson, thank you. Yeah, not the whole way. So we put it as an alternate because we weren't sure how much money it was going to come back as. So we put it as an alternate, ultimately came back too high, came back 200 grand more than what the cost estimate was. Long story short, Rich being the in-house engineer that put together the entire bid package to do the offsite improvements and hand it out as a separate project. So the bid opening is tomorrow. We'll look to award it. Now, that's really important to note because as we move the DPW team back in, right, because they've been at the concession stand, the building will be operational. Then we go into the second and final phase, which is the site work. So we want to ensure everybody is fatigued, right? That's how I've been qualifying it. Professionals are fatigued, the residents are fatigued, everybody's fatigued. And so what we've been making sure that everything is in place is all the work to complete the site work. Right? And this is one key piece because we want to make sure that when we leave, right, the proverbial we, it's done. Improvements are done, building's done, no more construction, and then, you know, we can figure out what our new normal is. I'm not gonna say go back to normal because it's gonna be completely different. Operational management iterations underway. I double tapped on that, really, really important. And then another big piece, if you recall, so both sites have areas of concern per the DEP, and we have until July of 25 to reconcile and close it out. All the AOCs, all the area concerns at the DPW are officially closed. And green thumbs up, no issues. So our LSRP, Kurt Martin, he's finished up the paperwork, he'll close out the DEP report. And segue. So this was great news because we have one final catch basin on the 3rd Street side that failed. And so we had to fix it. All of that worked out great. Fantastic work. So next slide.
Drew, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Just go back, the awarding of the separate project. So
Yeah.
is that happening? Is that definitely happening, or is it, we're waiting to see what the bids are like? Because it sounded like it was a 6-figure additional project that we carved out.
Bids
That,
are bid openings tomorrow,
Uh-huh.
so this is essentially like the rebid. I took the plan, redid it, redesigned it, scaled it back, put it back out to bid opening tomorrow. The reason we set the 24th, that's our next council meeting, so we anticipate it being awarded on the 24th.
Yeah, I mean, could
You
it,
know,
Unless they all come back.
yeah, are they really, like, what if they're all high? That's the,
then we have a conversation to have.
Then we would, the way the process works is I review the bids with the attorney. And I ultimately make a recommendation to the governing body. And one of the grounds for rejection is budget. If it comes way over allocated funds, that is a mechanism to reject.
great. Okay.
Can you go back one more, Sheila?
But that project will be built concurrently with the site work that will begin as soon as, winter breaks.
Will it end in the same time period?
That's the goal.
That's the goal.
Let's go, okay.
We've got all the underground utilities in on Maple, so we made sure the road was saw cut, the trenches were backfilled, we allow enough time for settlement. And then we'll come in, put in the curb, sidewalks, will and pave.
And there's 3 components to the site work. Fence and landscaping. Actually, two components, fence and landscaping, Maple Avenue. So the original Maple Avenue scope was far greater. Meaning the original drawing had all these additional improvements on it. Because if you recall, way back, there was plans to like make this into a parking lot and change this into like recycling center here, all of that did it backwards. The reason I give that as background is when that 457 came in, that also included some work here that is no longer happening because we reduced the scope now. So it'll be really interesting to see what it comes back with.
And we were able to, as part of the 3rd Street Phase 2. I pushed the limits a little bit there to get some of that done anyway.
Yeah, we're in good shape. So those are the 2 final pieces.
And when's that site work start?
So I don't know if the guys were serious or messing with me. So apparently like in the construction industry, the day after St. Patty's Day is when like spring work begins.
Okay.
That's what I was told. So they said, oh, it'll be the day after St. Patty's Day, pending the weather.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming it starts middle to end of March.
Okay.
Because we also want to make sure from a planting perspective that we time it with the weather correctly, so we give it the greatest chance that it,
Yeah.
roots and grows and matures, et cetera. So goal is by Q2, it's done,
Done.
fully done, yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
No.
So if you go 2 slides down, just give you guys some photos, right? So I should have put up before pictures, so this is what it looks like as of today. Front of the building, looking left, looking right. You can kind of see here, the extended recycling center, we added a 40-foot slab to the recycling center to account for all the cardboard. So it's from this pole, or excuse me, from the blue recycling can back is a bigger, recycling pad. And then scroll down, next one, it just gives you an idea of what it looks like on the inside. Came out really good. We're really, really happy. And so pending the 3 items in the CO, team will move in, and then we can begin some of the pre-site work that has to happen. That's DPW.
No stand-up desks for the DPW, come on.
Click there.
Oh,
So I'll be very careful how I qualify this, and Brian, keep me honest here. So the way that, so the base bid came back, and you always make sure that the funds that are approved are base bid plus 20%. Because 20% is the greatest amount of change order differentiation that you can legally absorb. So if it costs $100, we made sure we had $120 in our reserve. Doesn't mean you have $120 in your pocket. It just means that you can draw down that additional 20. So when you look at this, based on that logic, we're 11% underutilized, which is a good thing, right? So we took the base bid, the 20% accounted for change orders, and we're 11% underutilized. Doesn't mean I have that 11% in my pocket and I can go do another project. It doesn't work that way. But as far as
It has to be within the scope of the project or for some unforeseen circumstance and or as a result of doing something you find in economies of scale.
Yeah.
Basically, that's your. Good.
Hey, phenomenal. I love it. But he's spot on.
So it's 20, so like you said, the base bid's 100, well, for argument's sake, the base bid's 100. You have authorization for.
You have to
120?
make sure you're bonded, funded for $120.
Okay,
And do you have an allowance in that also? Do you know?
We have an allowance on certain.
Yeah, we
Yeah,
have
so you have-
environmental contingencies.
The
There's,
20% goes both ways. You can't reduce more than 20%, you can't increase more than 20%.
Well, an allowance is something that you require the bidder to bid in for unforeseen circumstances that may result in a change order. Talking about.
so is the
If
11,
you cite this, but, and it won't, and if it's not spent, you know,
Not spent, yeah.
yeah,
that's bad.
It's a
So
detail.
is
you do an adjustment at the end of the
is
project.
the 11% against the 120 or 11% is against the
Against the
100?
120.
So you're 109 right now.
One
Correct.
correct,
Yeah,
okay,
if we use that example.
Right.
gotcha.
The other thing too, right, I'd be remiss and not to be, not to bring up this data, but it's really, really important. So back in the fall, the original owner passed away unexpectedly. So that caused, and I just want to say that because Rich stepped in, Nick stepped in, Chris York stepped in, like everybody like stepped in, Chief stepped in. I mean, it was a huge curveball. So it's a real testament to the team. Okay, any other questions on DPW? All right, PD Community Center. So I'm gonna start PD and Community Center. Now, the 2 items that you're looking at are, on the right-hand side is stormwater infrastructure for the site. All of these sites were designed for not making water disappear, but taking all the water, ensuring none of it goes into the system, right? So whether you, and it was an Atlas 100 storm, if anybody wants to know like the calculation. That doesn't mean that the water disappears, right? That the water will naturally infiltrate into the ground, recharge, thank you, sir. On the left-hand side, you get an idea of the footprint and whatnot. There have been, knock on wood, really no unforeseen circumstances.
Great.
If you use the same mindset of the 120, this is 17% underutilized. So out of $100, it's really 103, which is fantastic. One area of concern left, right? So the same DEP type report. There's an old oil tank right around here. I think it's, I don't know how old it is. Some people say 100 years, some people say 50 years, whatever, it doesn't matter. It's gonna come out and then I'll close out the report. Now, when we briefed this, we also, the planning board, the TDRC requested that we brief parking. Parking is, if anybody knows this area, parking is really, really challenging, right? You got the ball fields and all that. The original parking analysis that was briefed by Rick Lear talked about 28 spots here There's some offsite improvements on fixed, which is a +4. And he talked about 28 spots in the parking lot by the church. Right, so, and that parking lot is entirely consistent with this parking lot. There wasn't a site plan, and that's why I'm here tonight, right? But when we briefed the overall capital plan, we made sure that we accounted for what was gonna happen there. And there's a tremendous amount of history here. There was a previous planning board approval. There was a previous understanding of how many spots it needed and whatnot. We'll get into that in a little bit. So just a little bit of flavor. This also shows the landscaping all around, and this includes the rain garden that exists here. And if you scroll to the next slide, you get an idea of what they look like. So this is the front of the PD. This is to the right of PD. Recall, we're adding a 6-foot path from Fisk all the way back. And then this was the community center. I didn't go in to take pictures, I didn't have like anybody with me and everything, so I just took pictures of the outside. Residential feel, and again, heat got turned on today, permanent heat. Which was the final piece. Now that's just gonna open the doors. Now we can get the floors done, we can finish putting ceiling in, etc. And we're looking to do the same type of schedule. So once the buildings are done, the police move in and then they knock down the old building and then we do the site work. And if you recall, the lowest responsible bidder for both projects was Hall. So it's the same GC in both locations. Scroll down. Okay, so now part of the reason why I'm back and giving an update is we weren't able to deliver 28 parking spots, we were able to deliver 31. We got 3 more. The asterisk here is that 2 of them are reserved for this building. And then only during church service, which is 10 to 12 on Sundays, are 5 spaces for the church. So out of those 33, it's 31 that will support parking, 31 here, 28 here, of which this row 14 is police, and then the additional 4. So we were able to add an additional 35 parking spaces to the area. Our original goal, I believe, was 28. This was super interesting because what it allowed us to do, and the reason we picked this specific slide is these like little red checkered boxes were test pits. So you have a few different challenges with stormwater in this area. All of the natural area flow goes from the natural area and cuts through community center fields in here. What we were trying to assess was not only can I make it a net zero, meaning any water from what we've created goes into a proper stormwater system, it doesn't go into the infrastructure, but can we make water disappear? Or go to the end, the answer was no. We dug these test pits, and we couldn't add additional stormwater infrastructure that would reduce the sheet flow from the natural area on down. Go to the next slide, and then I'll come back to this if you guys have questions. This is the overall landscaping plan. Go to the next slide, and we'll come back to this. I don't know if you guys have any questions, because this is some key data points. So we made sure from a consistency perspective, the lighting, right? If you recall, we looked at how many I think it's Calvin is the lighting, how many Calvin it was. What is the, Rich knows the phrase better than me, right? But how much, yeah, what the spread is, all of that, right? Fully consistent with what we did at the PD Community Center. We've entered a long-term partnership with Fish Chapel. The partnership just gets stronger every month, every year. And we have a permanent easement with them. So we worked with Fish Chapel. There's a permanent easement. We quote unquote are fully responsible for the parking lot. It's a borough parking lot. And that was part of the partnership. It went all the way up to their trustees. There's a whole separate kind of hierarchy structure that Fish Chapel has. Super interesting piece here. There was a tremendous amount of, can you go back one? It's easier for me to talk to. Okay, so can you go one more for me? I'm sorry.
No.
Right here, cool. Okay, you see this post and rail fence right here on the bottom? So if you look closely, there's a second post and rail fence. That's where it currently is. This property, 66, on the back part of the property encroached 17 feet on the church's property and 11 feet on the front of the property. We had to bring in two separate survey companies. We had to go back to the deed of the 1800s. I'm pretty sure King Henry XIII or somebody was referenced in there, no joke. It was an unbelievable exercise. But we wanted to make sure that obviously whenever you do a project like this, again, you can't leave any rock unturned. And so because of the sight line, because of the, not the sight lines.
Property line.
Thank you. Because of the property line discrepancies, we took it upon ourselves to make sure that we did it correctly. Scroll back down two more. Yep, one and two. So we had two separate site surveys. That's what the encroachment was. Chief and I have sat with the residents of 66 Maple Avenue. They were well aware of it. We're working with them that, you know, we make sure a fence is put back and the proper landscaping is put back. But their own site surveys that they have show that their property was over.
Everybody have title insurance? Don't worry about it.
Maybe not. We gained a tremendous amount of additional information, especially from a stormwater perspective. So this is really, really important. So if you guys recall, we broke up this project really in two phases. Phase one was like PD, community center, parking lot, and then phase two is community center, fields and area. And so where all the stormwater analysis is leading us to is if you really want to have an impact and make water disappear, you put a stormwater reduction site in community center fields with the tennis courts. Because they believe that Fourth Water Creek actually went under the tennis courts. That's why they always cracked. We did the test pit. So we gained so much more additional information, knowledge about the area. That's only going to help us when we get to that phase two with the community center. Total parking spaces, net 33 increase from the current situation. Consistent with the original parking analysis. And here's that 28, 31, and 4. That's why I double asterisk this 2 + 5. 2 is for the one house, 5 is for church service on Sundays. But a significant increase from what was previously there. Let's see real quick. Any questions on that?
We touch upon the bioprotection.
Oh, yeah. Can you go back 2, please? Okay. So this right here, I'll hit both pieces and just chime in where I'm missing, because this is one I missed last time. So this here is a stormwater system, recharge system. So the goal was to make this site, right, prevent as much water from going to the infrastructure. Obviously, we have overflows and whatnot that work. This is where the community center, so you have, I think it's the north baseball field here, and the infrastructure continues all the way out. But this was designed to absorb as much of the stormwater runoff from the parking lot and the two buildings. Obviously, if there's overflow, it has to have a system go out.
And it's gonna be installed under the new parking lot. And the fact that the PD is built on slab won't have any adverse effects on the foundation. Because there's no basement or crawl space.
Yeah, spot on. And then over here, we put a bioretention system. So again, it's to an Atlas 100 storm. What I learned is, and keep me honest here, is that all the new calculations are based on what the storm and the rainfall is as of today, right? Because most folks, we have one resident come up and say, hey, why don't you just make it for an Atlas 200? There's no 250, right? Why don't you just like double it? Well, one, if we had a 200-year storm, most of Fairhaven would be underwater when you think about the amount of water that comes in. But it's not, the system's not antiquated. The way they conduct these stormwater sheet flows. The other big learning moment, and I'll come back to the bioretention, is that the DEP does not materially discern with stormwater sheet flow between gravel and asphalt. There's minimal difference per the DEP standard. And the reason that's important is because this has been gravel forever.
So they're almost both impervious.
Exactly, and the runoff is insane. So what we're doing is curb, pavement, and and I'll say this, I love saying this, every single raindrop that hits asphalt now goes into this bioretention. an inch and a quarter naturally recharges, an inch and a quarter of rain naturally recharges back into the ground. And then if there's overflow, if you hit a storm that's more than 2 inches per hour, it will trickle, I don't know if that's the right word, right? But it will naturally go into the infrastructure, and head out there. You want to hit anything else in the
So
bioretention?
is the bioretention underground or
No.
visible?
The bioretention is basically an oversized rain garden, so it's gonna be planted with water tolerant type plantings.
Similar to another rain garden on that side,
Similar to
police
the
station?
other rain garden, keeping in line with the same type of landscaping, even from a maintenance standpoint.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, every
But
piece,
is it deeper? Like, what's the depth?
It's deeper than a traditional rain garden, but it acts as just like an oversized rain.
and there's a fence around it.
It's a pool.
Yes.
It's not a
You use
pool,
a
it's not
specific type of
it's
soil.
not a retention basin, it's
Oh,
gonna
okay.
recharge
Yeah.
into the soil. And the plants help soak all that up. During maybe a heavy rain event like we talked about, you'll see some water in there, just like you see out in Fairhaven Fields, we have the sand filter there. Maybe twice a year you'll see some water in there, but other than that, it'll dissipate.
What's the dimension roughly, like the length of that? It looks like an oval or semicircle.
Yeah. I'd have to look at my notes, I can get it to you, I don't have.
I
it.
would say
50 feet long?
30 to 40 feet by 20, It's basically,
It's quite large.
it's gonna be between the new parking lot and the existing dwelling that's on Fisk there. It's tucked right in there.
And that's why I put up, if you go to the.
So it even doubles as somewhat as a landscape buffer too, or,
Correct,
you know,
and that's why if you scroll down,
delineation
down
between the two
or.
properties.
But what's,
That's why.
what's causing, in the drawing itself, there's like a hard line around the edge of it. What's causing that? Is that a line of concrete? Is that a line of rock? Is that just?
So they incorporated some trench drains at the entrances to the parking lots to capture any of that runoff as well, along with grading the lot and the access drives to drain into traditional stormwater catch basins, which will then get piped into the bioretention. So it's somewhat self-contained within the site. The bioretention allows the rain event to happen, does provide some volume, but then it'll dissipate and recharge into the ground. It's a green infrastructure design,
Yeah.
essentially, that's what it is. In keeping with DEP's rules and promoting those types of infrastructure.
Right, so my question is, in the green sense of things, is. Yeah, here. This perimeter. Is that showing me that it's a concrete curb? Is it rock? Is it showing me any kind of material choices?
It's
that would that-
soils and grass and.
So it's not a hard edge.
It's
No.
natural, yeah, it's like.
It goes from grass and then it just like caves in.
And then just to add, we did look at doing pervious pavement for the parking lot. A project of this size just didn't make sense and it becomes a
It
ma-
clogged the
it's a ma-
second
it's a
you
maintenance
salt
issue.
it for
Yeah.
snow, it gets clogged and no
Clogged.
longer does work. And by the way, same thing for the bioretention basins. Wait till you see how that soil you have to use compacts, you're an engineer,
Yeah.
but it's, they
Um,
look pretty though.
any other questions before I go to
Yeah.
kind of the next steps? Yeah,
So this whole Fisk Chapel piece,
yes.
so you said that the borough now will take responsibility for that parking. Did we purchase it? Was there an acquisition?
Yeah, it was an easement.
There's an
So,
agreement, it's like a developer's agreement, where it spells out everyone's responsibilities. Maintenance of the parking lot, the stormwater, the lighting, who pays for the electric. And then it gets into the legal from the actual areas that the borough can use, from the access drives, the parking areas, they drew up
They-
the easements and everything.
They own it though, it's
They own
it's
it.
their owned
And
land.
it's a document that's been
Yeah.
executed by both parties, the governing body. We may have to amend it, depending on
with the final.
what the
like,
final is,
so-
but it's pretty close. to
But the easement then grants us the ability to utilize their space or their
Correct.
land, right?
And then they
As I
even-
understand it, yeah.
And then we
And
also
then-
made sure that both properties. You've got this imaginary property line between the PD and community center property and the church that. You've got your proper ADA access, your walkways, all your connectivity as it relates to getting. Like, just like we do here with a shared parking agreement, we make sure it all works.
It was 20,000
So if,
plus the parking lot, that's how much the easement cost
oh, okay.
with the church, it was, so the easement cost to the church, to them was, we wrote them a $20,000 check. And in exchange of that, and,
Yeah, you approach my property.
what's up?
As
You-
compensation or to be like, I guess what I'm
Doug
saying
would know
is
better than me.
if they sell that property, what happens to
He's
the
more
property?
than land.
The easement goes with the deed, right?
Yeah.
Is that the deed?
As long as it's properly worded, it should run with land,
Correct.
and whoever comes into the ownership has to recognize that.
Correct. I call it first right of refusal, but that's not.
But it may be.
It's, I forget, Greg Cannon worked on it.
So, yeah, if you may have done that.
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what you need in the future.
Yep.
If the property were sold, some easements, allow a person who has access to, refuses to purchase. But it depends on what you need, what you wanna do.
Like at the sale, Doug, like, I mean, I know it's a big hypothetical, but let's assume somebody does buy that. And there's an easement there. The easement stays with the properties,
Yep.
it would continue to
it's
function
recorded.
as normal. But if the purchaser of the property wanted to somehow get rid of the easement, they would have to pay us, or.
All this is spelled out, I'd have to get.
Yeah,
You'd have to-
get
yeah,
legal- I don't have
it's a
enough
big
on mine.
hypothetical, I
It
just-
depends
yeah.
more
on the
curious
language
than-
of the easement.
Yeah.
I could have sworn too in there that we put that the borough has also a chance to purchase it if we want to,
Okay,
but again, I don't wanna speculate, it was ratified a while ago.
no, but it's, I mean,
It's now
nobody's
public,
buying,
if
it's
it's
not for
signed, it's
sale.
now
so-
public
Yeah,
document.
so
And you
it's
have to,
terrific, yeah.
you have to conduct that level of diligence on these documents, right?
Right.
Because it's, you're all friends till you're not, right? Until something changes, right? I hate to say it, my legal buddy tells me that all the time, so. Just a couple of the points right here, you can see the connective tissue, right? So here's the walkway into the community center. These are still, all the infrastructure is in place for EV. We're just waiting for state guidance on how they're going to dictate electrical vehicle charging, both for police vehicles and for personal vehicles on municipal property, so nothing changed there. Again, we had a net 3 from what was originally briefed, which we need to win, because the more parking we can have here, the better.
Any EV space in the fiscal lot?
Negative. No, we didn't have enough we maxed out the infrastructure with the 8 spots. So we hit how many EV charging stations could have based on the current, we would have had to upgrade the electrical service. It's more complicated than that, but
Okay, all right.
that's, yeah, because we asked that. And don't forget, right, so the electric, the water, right, there's fire suppression in this and everything. Everything comes into the PD feeds the community center. The lighting here is fed from the community center, right? So this is all one account, I'll call it, right? That covers all 3 of those areas.
And all of those facilities are underground?
So, yeah, so the pole comes here, all the electricals underground, they ran all new, if you remember when they did all of the, help me out here, they did like 17 streets where they upgraded all the American water infrastructure. So we timed it with that, we added in you have to do a separate tap for the fire suppression
Yeah, we had
system.
to upgrade, they did a new water main out on Fisk
Yeah.
in anticipation of these projects.
Cool.
Yeah, American Water worked those, and Rich worked
And
that.
then we got all the flow data, and then it was all designed, better than us.
Yep.
It's always easier when the hole's already there.
Yeah,
Well, they didn't want to do it.
dig up a brand new road, you don't wanna do that.
That's exactly what we're trying to prevent, right? So,
And then based on our ordinance, the utility companies come back now and mill and pave curb to curb. So we had them pave all the way up to basically, the west side of the property line here. And then we jumped over and had them finish the paving from Maple heading east. So as part of these projects, that'll all get done. And obviously understanding there's still some off-site improvements, the parking, the roadway, if you.
Not just run a line along Maple.
It's getting realigned because the curb line goes out, it's kind of not uniform, it creates a bottleneck as it is, so.
And don't forget, right, we're gonna jettison all the stormwater infrastructure, we'll televise where needed, every time we do projects like this, we always clean out the infrastructure. And we use pipe to see what we're dealing with, if we're gonna compromise infrastructure. Next stormwater infrastructure here is 70 to 100 years old, give or take.
It's one of the older systems within the borough, so to his point, what we've been doing is we send a camera in and a jet, and we outsource it, we have a company come in and jet the pipes. And basically back everything out. There's cases where we, if you have a 24 pipe, you can only get 12 inches out of it, so. we can work our way through it. That's all.
If you go to the last side, Sheila, and then, well, one more. So, a modified list of this was briefed to the governing body this past Monday or last week, I'm losing track of the time. So any additional work, right, you beautifully qualified it, right? Like it has to be within the scope of work, it's gotta be unforeseen, it has to be something specific to economies of scales when you have a change order. There is more data that we have now on Fish Chapel, right? So there is gonna be some additional change orders potentially at the PD Community Center contract, just given the stormwater insights that we have now, so minimal, but done. We're getting the updated cost estimate, the drawing, and then obviously we're gonna certify funds. Brian Olson's also chair of finance. So me, him, Nancy, who's the CFO, Chris York, the borough administrator, will work to ensure they have certified funds. But obviously seek to authorize to bid, because the goal is that all the site work, right, at both locations all happens concurrently. So when it's done, it's done. Everybody's even fatigued here, right? Even the residents. I keep saying it over and over, but I'm asking for everybody's grace. It's really right there. So that's the update.
Sweet.
Great,
That's really terrific. Chief, any comments?
No, like I said, we worked on this hand in hand, talking to neighbors, everything seems to go pretty good. The church, the design for the parking lot, what the church, we worked with the church, that's what they wanted, they're very happy. We're good, the building, I was in the building today, it's really just waiting for carpet and tile, which we're going to heat, and they can be coming next few weeks, so we're really moving forward.
Amazing. Any public questions with regards to DPW? I know we have some members of the public here. Any questions?
Okay, you guys. Okay,
It was good.
thanks, man. All right.
Great.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Councilman.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you.
So, like I said, so the,
Thank you.
the master plan, thanks, Chief.
Yeah.
Thank you, council. So, the master plan reexamination, I think we need the cost piece to have like a meaningful sort of discussion on how to move forward. I think we've talked in circles a lot, and I think this piece or the draft that he's given us, I assume is gonna help us, unstick what's been stuck, and so.
Did you
I'm not, so I,
opened it.
oh,
I looked at the bottom line.
okay.
Should I wait for the
I
proposal discussion?
I think we
So
should,
we're doing budget stuff now, so I would love to know rather sooner than later.
Yeah, I'm gonna-
That'd be now.
Yeah.
So I just slide a piece of paper.
There's just one thing to think about, we may have talked about this. but-
I was a little over.
So my understanding is if it's a re-exam, it's in the operating budget, which is under the cap. And if it's a new plan, then it can be capital. And so those are treated differently and have different constraints. So the sooner we all can decide, the better, that we.
So the
can work on that
constraints
part.
on capital are probably less than the constraints on operating.
Yes, it's a different
Yeah.
process, but then there's a little bit more money available.
Right. And I think we determined, or at least it was proffered last meeting, that with the work that needs to be done or the reviews that need to happen, it was gonna probably look more like a rewrite anyway. And so, yeah, and so that was by definition would probably be something more significant. And so, look, this is really unfortunate with what's happened, obviously, on a number of different levels. And so, like, I would just like the opportunity to read what was there before it sort of gets sort of dumped out. And so what I'll do is read it tonight. I'll have Sheila distribute it, and then we can get the subcommittee together at some point in the next week to discuss it so that we don't lose the time of this month. Yeah,
Did you have a drop the date kind of thing, or is it,
It's March.
okay, why don't we do it this week?
yeah. So that's where, anyone else have questions, comments, anything on the master plan?
Who's on your second?
It's Andrew, Jim, and Dave, I think, right, yeah.
Obviously, your administrator is anxious to know.
Yeah, we're all anxious to know, so I think that's the, and so, as far as the administrative items, I think we're done, unless anybody wants to talk about anything. So then I'd like to open up the meeting to public comment. Yes, come forward, yeah.
My name is Scott Core. I have prepared some comments about basically some very disheartening and disappointing, really, things that have come to light in my life here with regard to the planning board. Not with regard to the planning board members. I had a great experience last time when I was here presenting what I was looking at last year, but I'd like to just read something to you, please.
Yeah, you can sit, I mean, if you'd like to sit.
You know what? I've been sitting, sorry. I appreciate it. I'm sorry, this is very frustrated. Just, I had to put my thoughts all down on paper so that I can, explain to you guys and girls. So, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, members, board affiliates, my name is Scott Core. Standing next to me is my wife, Lindsay. I came before the board during the March 2024 meeting to apply for a minor subdivision of the property located at 65 Parker Avenue. The physical land that makes up the property, the land itself, is subdividable by right. That is, two new completely conforming R5 lots can be formed without any special permits, variances, or zoning approvals from the planning board. The special circumstances that we had come before the board and asked for last year, in March of 2024, were those necessary to keep an existing dwelling, a 1959 construction, 1,800 square foot, single family split level home remaining as it stood on the corner of the property, the intersection of Parker and Smith. During the meeting, I offered to change the location of the front door to the home, and there was a lengthy discussion between the board and my professionals. I had Inside Engineering and Brad Basham from my attorney here at the time, on how it would benefit myself and the borough to remain entirely as the building were, especially considering that I had purchased the house off the original owners, actually, who lived there since 1959. I left that meeting feeling as if the board genuinely appreciated how important it was for us to see that the original home that helped our family in our great time of need remain intact. And there was a picture of that intersection since 1959, and if you pass it, it's got a huge oak tree on the corner of it. Not the most glamorous thing in the world, but it's been there for a while, and it really helped us. However, the months that followed that meeting leading up until tonight have done nothing but hurt my family and completely sour my regard for the borough area. As I began to put together the resolution compliance package, I had several contractors stop by to provide quotes for what was being requested. The drywall the borough was asking to be put in place to manage the runoff from the existing home, and to replace the concrete curb, sidewalk, and driveway apron along the entire 104-foot length of Parker Avenue face of the property. The estimates for this work alone were between $40,000 and $50,000. I understand that new building code requires proper water management. We just went over this with the town master plan. I understand that completely. For example, on the new interior lot that would be created on my property. Well, why am I being required to dig up a massive 10 by 10 by 6 foot section of my yard to install a drywall and dig trenches around the entire house to install a water management system for a home that has existed and managed its own runoff without any issue since 1959? To be clear, no changes to the amount of impermeable surface area, which we also spoke about before, from a new building, structure, or hardscaping are being added to the corner lot. It will remain entirely as is. The newly formed corner lot size is also beyond the 7,000 square foot, 70 by 100 minimum zoning ordinance for an R5 corner lot. By that same token, why am I being required to rip out 104 linear feet of perfectly good curb and sidewalk on the Parker Avenue face of the property when the utility install for the interior lot will only disturb approximately 10, 12, maybe 15 feet of that total length and will not affect the driveway apron in any way? What makes matters worse is that the borough is planning to redo or so I heard, that they're looking to redo the curb, sidewalks, and road on Parker in the near or not so distant future anyway. So I will be contributing to instead of benefiting from these improvements unlike the rest of my neighbors. Nonetheless, I proceeded to work toward perfecting the subdivision, because I was so happy that the house could remain. And I sought some guidance from the borough with regard to several items. After all, I'm not a builder, and the town specifically asked that we work together, I think we mentioned it before about the road, to develop, so that everything was happening at the correct time. And to develop a lot in a manner that was consistent with the neighborhood aesthetic and the overall borough master plan. On May 14th, I sent an email specifically to Mr. Gardella requesting feedback on the length and positioning of potential future driveways and utility locations. I got absolutely no response from Mr. Gardella regarding any of my questions. In fact, after the first survey and utility packet was delivered by Inside Engineering on June 10th, which Rich did acknowledge with a simple email stating that we, the borough, would start reviewing. There was absolutely zero communication from Mr. Gardella straight through to October 17th, when he replied with his first resolution compliance letter titled Resolution Compliance Letter Number 1. However, even this response was not prompted by his own volition. Rather, this letter was prompted directly by the town administrator, who I had to reach out to and contact, seeking a response from the town for our compliance packet. By that point, early October, we were seeking absolutely any response that we could receive at all from the town, since the 190-day deadline to record the deeds was approaching on October 23rd, 6 days later. In fact, I doubt if we would have ever gotten any response at all from Mr. Gardella without requesting the town administrator's assistance in soliciting a response. And I appreciate what went on here. I understand that the man's busy and he's right here. Like, I appreciate that. And again, I'm a resident. I understand I'm not your highest priority. But upon receipt of that first letter on October 17th, we thought, oh, great. Now we can respond appropriately and finish, hear his comments about what we are in compliance with, out of compliance with. And we could probably get this all done in the 6-day window from 10/17 to 10/23. However, when we opened the letter, titled Resolution Compliance Letter Number 1, there was no meaningful response to what we had submitted over the 5 months prior. In fact, the only thing Mr. Gardella chose to do with his initial response letter was to suggest that we had somehow misrepresented the ownership interests associated with our property, insinuating that we were perhaps acting as strawmen for a local builder. This letter simply wasted more of my time and required the response of my attorney to clarify that we were the sole owners of this property. Mr. Gardella's second letter dated 10/31, which was notably 8 days already after the filing date for the deeds, the 190-day window. It was the first single piece of actual and useful correspondence by the borough or any of its affiliates that we, as the applicants, could look at and say, okay, let's get to work to address the areas of non-compliance as quickly as possible and continue moving us along. At no point during the prior 5 months did Mr. Gardella ever pick up the phone or send an email to clarify or provide any guidance to what was being expected of us as the applicants. During those 5 months, we had inquired for status updates more than a dozen times. Furthermore, it was painfully obvious that little, if any, attention was being paid to our application by Mr. Gardella. In fact, he must have copied and pasted from a previous compliance letter because he titled resolution compliance letters number 2 and 3 for our project as 129 Hance Avenue. We were representing 65 Parker Avenue. Perhaps even more egregious was that one of the areas of non-compliance noted in letter number 2 was the alleged lack of publication in the newspaper. This, despite the fact that the borough was the entity that physically handled the publication. So the left hand of the borough did not know what the right hand of the borough was doing. In any event, it was at this point, as evidenced by an email that I sent to the borough on 11/1, the day after I received that on 10/31, that I became aware that I would have to remove 3 additional trees that would interfere with sewer and gas utility installations. And that one would interfere with the building envelope, the building envelope of the new home on the interior lot. To be clear, it was not our intention to request to remove any trees that did not absolutely have to be removed. In any event, we submitted a revised tree removal permit application reflective of Mr. Gardella's compliance letter comments dated 10/31 on November 6th. And we did not hear anything back for 6+ more weeks. Several weeks later, Christy Larson did respond and stated that as per Mr. Gardella, quote, the items from his latest engineering letter need to be addressed prior to any permits being issued. That's reasonable. However, every single item that was in the letter was in fact addressed by the revised tree removal permit application that we submitted on November 6th. I had to send numerous emails to Sheila Olson, who, by the way, had been excellent, prompt, courteous, and the only beacon of hope throughout this entire process. Thankfully, she was able to locate the revised tree removal permit application that addressed all of the concerns previously mentioned. As more time passed, we finally received resolution compliance letter number 3 on January 15th. In this letter, Mr. Gardella now said that the borough's tree expert had deemed our project a large-scale tree removal project. This language, which was added in the amended tree ordinance dated 11/12 and published on 11/16, did not exist before when our tree application permits were submitted. So we cannot be required to comply with an ordinance that did not exist at the time of the first submittal or the revised submittal. So essentially, from November 6th, the date of this revised submittal, until January 15th, the town was sitting on our revised tree removal permit application, but they didn't even know that they had it. Once again, the ball was dropped by the borough. As soon as I began to push back on not being governed by the new tree ordinance, which again was adopted on the 12th of November and published, so it's formal, on 11/16 of 24. As soon as I began to push back, I got another escrow bill from the borough on February 3rd of for $2,000, right? I gotta pay for my experts, I gotta pay for their experts. Prompt as always, I submitted a check for that amount. Literally 2 days later, we get an email from Mr. Gardella stating that we missed the October 23rd, 190-day deadline, and we need to reapply and submit even more escrow and application fees to the borough before an extension could even be considered or granted, to even appear here tonight. What has become painfully obvious here is the absolute lack of accountability and professionalism on behalf of the borough and its constituents. This process has been an absolute nightmare for me and my family. And the mere fact that we were asked to resubmit a new application with all new application and escrow fees in order to be able to reappear in front of the board to ask for an extension is, in a word, unbelievable. It actually feels like we were being deliberately targeted, because I've been vocal about my frustrations with this process all along. When I asked ahead of time for a simple extension application form to fill out, I was advised by the borough that there was no such form. Why should we have to pay, my family, why should we have to pay for any extension fee when the borough has been completely unresponsive and is essentially responsible for missing the filing deadline to begin with? In fact, when you lay out the timeline and the first letter penned by Mr. Gardella, it becomes painfully obvious that the borough is doing everything, or it seems that the borough is doing everything in its power to hurt our family. The first official correspondence letter from Mr. Gardella's office, resolution compliance number 1, dated 10/17, 6 days before the 190-day window, made no comment on the status of our application. It was just a passive, aggressive, threatening letter. In fact, the first letter that had any really usable information with regard to the status of our resolution compliance was dated 10/31, which was already after the 190-day window to record the deeds. The borough put us in a situation where it was physically impossible to record the deeds in the 190-day window allowed. Throughout the months of July, August, and September, and the beginning of October, I reached out to the board secretary numerous times to inquire about the status of the application. She just kept apologizing for the delays, and at one time mentioned that Mr. Gardella, I believe she mentioned, Mr. Gardella was out on a paternity leave or something about a family leave or something. Every man or woman should be able to exercise the right to be with their family 100%. I got no problem with that. However, how was an alternative arrangement not made by the borough to handle the communications and normal business that needed to be taken care of in Mr. Gardella's absence? During the month of September, I actually ran into a planning board member who sat on the planning board during the hearing for our minor subdivision. After hearing our nightmare of delays and lack of communication by the borough, he said that he actually wasn't surprised at all. And he knows the communication and the overall process is absolutely horrible. He told me he was currently running for council at the time, and one of the items on his platform was to establish the Office of the Ombudsman to assist applicants who are being treated unfairly by the borough. In early October, I specifically asked the board secretary in a group email dated 1 week prior to the expiration of the 190-day window if this deadline would be an issue. Mr. Gardella did not respond to my concern at all. Instead, correspondence between the engineer and I began on 10/31 after that date and continued until 2/3 of 25 with absolutely no mention of the deed recording deadline issue. It was only when I began to request a specific response to the issue about the tree ordinance that the borough decided to stonewall my application rather than address it in writing. This process, the simple minor subdivision of a single piece of land into 2 R5 conforming R5 lots, has cost us over $40,000 just so far in engineering, escrow, and attorney fees. Think about that. It's a simple. There's no development plan. It's a simple subdivision. Development plan starts after this. All we are asking for is to be treated fairly. As the board secretary can attest, anytime there was correspondence from the town or something that required a response on our part, we were borderline instantaneously prompt in doing what was required. At the time of this meeting, the only outstanding issue is the appropriate response from the borough's tree expert, which we have asked for on 3 separate occasions. The borough, in bad faith, has failed to advise us of the negative material impact of the revised tree ordinance and what it would mean to the cost of our project. Even so, our tree removal permit applications both predate the ordinance change. We should be grandfathered in. It was the borough that sat on our revised application and didn't even know that they had it. Meanwhile, all this time back and forth between the town and my hired professional just cost us more and more and more money for no good reason. Major life decisions were made based on the result of the March 24 planning board meeting. Highest among them was the decision to rent out the home located at 65 Park Avenue. We moved around the block, basically. We are a middle-class family and we're not in a position to carry two properties with mortgages on them, especially for any length of time. The home, existing as it has since 1959, once again saved the day for another Fairhaven family. In this particular instance, the new tenants who have been Fairhaven residents for over 12 years were forced to sell their family home in town because of a personal economic hardship. The family wanted to remain in Fairhaven until their 3 children finished school. After all, aren't the schools one of the biggest reasons they're all here in the first place? So in this case, the existing home is now providing an affordable way for this family to stay in town. If the home had been demolished and replaced as this new 2 conforming lot scenario could be, this would not be possible. As you know, a lot of new wealth is moving into this area. However, keeping the old house on the property and building a new one on the interior lot next to it is the perfect balance of access points for future families, as was recognized by approvals we received at the March 24 meeting. During that meeting, I believe the consensus in the room was to promote economic development within the authority granted to the board by ordinance, not to hinder logical conforming development by burdening the applicant with insurmountable costs and bureaucratic red tape. Had we not been tortured by this process as it has unfolded thus far to date, the interior lot could have been well on its way to performing as a permanent $18,000 to $20,000 tax variable for the town, for the borough. It is especially worrisome that this development is being stifled, while at the same time the Board of Education is actively creating a foundation for donation to help fix budget shortfalls. It's ironic, really. As you're all aware, the planning board has the authority to take action at any of its public meetings. And we're here tonight asking for you to please listen to our story and provide us with the necessary extension to move our compliance past the finish line. Additionally, we're also requesting that the drywall and concrete requirements for the existing home, which are not meant to be touched, be removed from the compliance requirements. The combination of the increase in performance guarantee, $50,000 just for the performance guarantee, and the work itself, another $50,000 plus the 40 already spent, make it completely uneconomical to keep the house. And we believe that keeping the house as it stands is best for all involved. Thank you for all your time, and I apologize for being somewhat long-winded, but we are extremely upset at the way we treat that.
Okay, so thank you for your statement. Doug, what are we, I mean,
I don't have an application before you. I know you're saying you
Right.
don't want to make an application, but I don't know what you work off of. And I don't know
So-
what we have.
our board, right, like we need to take, we need to hear an application, right, and have it heard in the you know, ahead of, like, have it announced ahead of time and heard before the public, right? That's how our process as the planning, you know, as the planning board works. As you state, like, we as a planning board took all the required actions in a fairly compressed, you know, timeline from the time you submitted on February 28th to the time that your resolution was approved on April 16th, right? So I sort of empathize with everything that you're saying, and it's clear that you're having struggles trying to get your project completed. But we're up against, I think, some statutory, like non-borough, non-borough state law, you know, in terms of when things have to be completed.
Let me do
Yeah.
this. Let me try to unpack the issues that you have. And then the issues that the board will have trying to address that. I'm not providing you with legal counsel, okay?
Yeah.
Assume all the disclaimers. Okay. What I heard was you'd like to be relieved of some, I don't know whether you're asking to be relieved of the permitting. Just let me unpack each one. Permitting for the tree. This board doesn't have any jurisdiction over that issue as to whether or not you're grandfathered or not grandfathered. That's something beyond this board's jurisdiction. You're going to have to address that. And again, I know this is the last thing you want to hear, but you're gonna have to address that with the borough, the municipality, or the entity that's in charge of that permit.
Can you pause for a second? I wrote the tree ordinance, and we'll talk after the meeting.
Yeah, in terms of asking to be relieved of conditions of approval, certainly I mean, you can take your application, and again, I'm not suggesting that you do this, but it has been done before when people need extensions of time. They take the application, and again, you should talk to your own counsel about this. Ask to waive a number of conditions. I'd like to waive this, I'd like to waive the fee, I'd like to waive this. The board has the opportunity to take that into consideration and waive that. You would only know that if you spoke with counsel or received counsel from them. Again, I'm not trying to make business for lawyers, but we have had people come in and ask for extension. It happens. But in terms of granting extensions, we have to take a look at, and we have to have something before us by way of evidence as to the basis for either the reason for the extension to get your approval. And if it's a waiver of the conditions, we'd go back and take a look as to why we put those conditions in initially. Unfortunately, if the board is anything like me, I don't particularly remember all the minutia or the detail. I wrote the resolution, I'm sure, as to why we wanted a dry well done or what the conditions were or why it was recommended. But again, we can always take a look at those things. But I can't simply undo that without the proper procedures of following municipal land use law, which is codified in our ordinances as to how this matter comes before the board.
And I understand that, and I appreciate,
I'm not trying to be, I'm not trying to create more
and
problems.
I actually expected that response, and I appreciate that. And the reason that I didn't fill out another redundant application was because everything I do, I have to, like, why should I have, this delay was no fault of my own. I've done everything that I could possibly do to get this done on time, and I didn't have it. So what I was really asking for is, I understand you can't waive the process, but why should I have to pay another, I just laid out, I literally put a $2,000 check on a Monday, and then 2 days later, oh, by the way, 2.5 months ago, you missed, I knew that date was important, and I had asked and tried to push through.
I will tell you this, I'm not going to make a comment on, and it would be unfair for me to make a comment on any matters involving personnel. You certainly have a right to make any comment, you certainly have a right to make any criticism, you certainly have a right to make any comments. This board will not make any comment.
I understand.
In terms of our personnel. Because number one, I've got some statutory obligations if I'm going to discuss a member of the personnel as to whether or not that matter is going to be discussed in public. We haven't done that. You're free to make your comments. It doesn't insulate you from anything. Free to make your comments. I'm not going to characterize or not characterize. I'm going to take your comment for what it's worth. And I know the board will investigate further from there, but in terms of getting you to the next step. All right, here's something my grandfather told me a long time ago. We can fix the blame anytime we want, before or after. Let's try to fix your problem first. Let's try to get you your permits. I can't do anything for your trees. In terms of conditions, if you set that out and at least get us the information so we can get started, so that we can pull your old resolution, take a look at those things and get that started. If there are sufficient funds already, and we can talk about a reduced fee, the board's gonna have to make that determination. I can't make that determination. I can't do it on a subjective basis. And I know your feelings of, it wasn't me that dropped the ball. You guys dropped the ball, but it's coming out of my pocketbook. I hear you.
And that's the reason why, respectfully, that's the reason why I would have to bring my attorney and my engineer. They'll get paid for no reason. Everything's done already, like all the submittals, like everything that needs to be submitted is done already.
And accepting that for the moment, if something happens in the middle of your hearing where you need somebody like that, I don't want to set you back again. At least have a consultation. At least, and again, I'm not trying to make you spend more money. You've already spent more money, but I'd like to get you done and get your project.
I understand. I'm at the point where I don't have more money to spend. I am not made more. This is an incredible amount of money. It's a simple thing.
I
It's an
encourage you to
incredible amount of
fill out the application to the best that you can. If there comes something that you can't do, request a waiver. I'm gonna turn it over to professionals to take a look at to see whether or not, based upon the information you've submitted, they can make a reasonable recommendation to the board to either support or not support your application, and we can do it the best we can.
Doug, is there a way for the applicant to request relief on the fee in the process of filing the application such that he doesn't have to front the money?
He can make a request for those waivers in terms of those types of things as to whether or not those fees can be waived. That's gonna have to be something we're gonna have to consult with the administration about. I don't set fees here.
You know, what's the path for the administration reviewing that request?
Let me talk to you separately. That would be a matter of counsel. I'd rather talk to you individually.
And I try my best to compel a response from the town regarding the tree. The tree expert, Sherry Spiro, she did respond that, I understand this is not your purview within, I understand that. But she did respond that, you know, basically based on the new ordinance change, it would be a, what's called a, large scale. tree.
Large,
Which I understand.
I listened to.
Which
you.
I understand that, right? But I'm trying to compel a written response. I did so myself through email 3 separate times, and I'm here tonight. How do I compel the response to try to get where, so I'm not looking, I don't wanna ruffle any feathers. I didn't wanna be here tonight and read that to you or anybody. I really feel.
I can't provide you that counsel as to how you compel a response from someone.
And that's.
I
that's
hear
what I'm
you.
facing.
And to the extent, to the extent that you want that relief, and you can, you know. I don't know what the permitting process is for trees. I wouldn't know if it hit me in the head. But in terms of at some point in time, someone reviewing it, make your pitch there.
I tried, I'm trying everything.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I
So what we can do, I think, as a board, right, is I think it's worth a discussion with Chris. I think it's worth a discussion. You know, I think it's worth a discussion with Chris to like just make sure that there's if there hasn't been attention that there is, I'm not saying there has or hasn't, but sort of like what, you know, we can ask that question and then understand.
You have limited jurisdiction. You can certainly encourage them and certainly pick.
We've had a member of
If
the,
you'd like me to pick up the phone tomorrow and speak to your.
we've had a member of the public come forward and,
Sure.
and talk about an issue that they're having right now. That problem isn't something that we can take action on as a board tonight, right? There's nothing we can do to sort of help that problem or alleviate that problem, right? We, from where I'm sitting as chair of the board, right, unfortunately is, you know, you submitted something on February 28th. We all agreed on a resolution, right? We all agreed on a resolution. Your professionals were there. Though that resolution was agreed to. And on April 16th, that resolution was sort of written and signed off on. And so your 190-day clock started to tick, right? When you know, after that, I don't, like I said, the 190 days is a state law. It's municipal land use law. That there's nothing I can do about that right now, right? There's nothing we as a board can do about that, right? But what we can do, right, is I think if you consult with your professionals and come back to the borough with an application or something that we can hear before this board.
Something that I can advertise and get on an agenda.
And something I can put on a meeting agenda that can then be debated and then perhaps acted upon. That's all I like as the, yeah.
So is it possible that I could fill out the new application and get on the next meeting agenda, so I can possibly get an extension for the. Because the major relief that I need to, the other stuff I feel like it hopefully can be worked out, but the major thing is what's preventing everything else is I need the extension for. The municipal land use law, the 109 days.
Let me, in protecting my client, say the following: if you complete an application and it is deemed complete so that it can be listed on the agenda, it doesn't sound like it is anything because you're not asking for variance relief unless one of those conditions required variance. I don't think it did. Then you could probably do that without having to advertise for notice and probably come here before the board, but we need to be able to have our professionals take a look at that so they can make the recommendations, particularly if the board initially, as a condition, wanted some type of a structure there to address issues that we either saw or were recommended by our professionals to address. The reason why something in 1959 maybe didn't have those structures is because after 1959, you were born probably. After 1959, we had Irene. After 1959, we had Superstorm Sandy. After we learned a couple of other things, and there may be other issues there. So that structure that may not be addressed, but that interior lot structure may need something so that we don't screw something up there. We try to do something better, even though it may not have needed it in the past. We try to improve the situation there every time we can. And where we can, particularly, as you've already heard, where we already had the hole there, so now we're gonna do as much as we can to take care of
I
that.
understand
That
with
may
new
be why
construction-
we addressed that.
Sure.
And I'm speculating.
No, I understand, and I understand that with new construction, I don't question the logic of all that was discussed here with new construction, I understand that completely. But with regard to the corner lot, that's what I'll be, so I'll complete, a revised application, I'll submit it, and I'll try to get my calendar as soon as I possibly can. I just. honestly-
And as a courtesy to you, I mean, I know you don't want to incur more legal fees. I take calls from council all the time that does not result in a bill to the borough or that just to speed and expedite things along. Have your council give me a call. I'll try to, I'll,
Can I just add a few?
Absolutely.
And.
Yeah, I think Rich,
I
yeah.
appreciate your comments. I did listen.
And I feel bad even like, you're sitting
No,
right here, like
To the chairman's point, the application came in the end of February of 24. I reviewed it, we reviewed it internally, less than a week. We got them before the board.
Yeah.
Within a few weeks, which is at record speed. We then handed them a resolution of approval that April with many, many conditions. And the way we approach these is you as the applicant, which essentially as a developer, because you're going to develop that property, is responsible to take care of all those conditions.
Agreed.
So I'm not gonna get into the specifics on timeline and all the technical stuff. We can save that for the next meeting.
fix plan, fix problem.
But, yeah, and to the council's point, I guess what I wanna I'm the board engineer. I'm not here to walk the applicant through the process and ensure them, okay, are your taxes paid? All, that's their responsibility to submit all that stuff. And yes, there are still things that need to be done. I mean, we just got the deeds 2 weeks ago, so there's things that have been trickling in and, we have left, we
Sorry,
have.
I don't want to pay, but we've been asking for months for response from you and we've gotten like
If you-
nothing. It's been crazy.
I-
It's only had like
I-
3 months.
I don't need.
All right, I mean, so respectfully, we gave you the floor without any
Sure.
interruption. I'd just like to hear.
My
And
point
again,
is, you have a resolution, it spells out every point by point. Based on what was memorialized in that resolution. There's all the findings of fact. It talks about the testimony, it talks about the planner's letter, the engineer's letter, all the technical stuff that goes with it. It talks about all the outside agency approvals, your sewer, your utilities, your off-site improvements, your tree removal, whatever the case, whatever has to do with that application. It's the obligation of the applicant to get all that stuff and get everything in. It's not for borough staff to sit there and sift through the whole resolution and say, oh, wait, you still need this, you still need that. It's gotta be submitted in a complete package. And just as an aside, your engineer did make a submission. Almost every comment says the applicant understands this requirement and will comply. The applicant understands this requirement and will comply. The applicant understands, so it's. The redundancy of that comment is telling me, all right, they're gonna work on it, they're gonna get it to the borough and. As things move along, so. I sent you the email saying, hey, wait, we're expired. And I don't have a tickler file on that stuff, I don't keep track of when,
approvals necessarily took place and when that 190-day expiration is as per statute. That's why I referenced the old email from your engineer that said, hey, wait, we're getting close, so.
I mean,
So
from us as a planning board, right, if somebody was getting close to a deadline, like you know, we're happy to hear an application for an extension, right? I mean,
Generally,
Is it-
the general procedure is that before it has formally lapsed, the request for an extension comes in. We have extended that period of time if there were conditions that the applicant could satisfy. And we examine the reasons for that.
yeah, that's my, like, here, like, we would,
I guess the biggest problem, just thinking about this holistically, is that this whole time we've been treated as a builder. When all we are just residents who own a piece of subdividable land, and we're just looking to do it the right way, not ruffle any feathers, and have some guidance. And to the point where that the one planning board member at one of the town events, he had suggested an office of the ombudsman. We need to do something. I live in this town. We need to do something so that if another member, or I'm sorry, another resident comes before the board and has an issue like this, they're not treated like a builder and expected. And I understand Rich's point, and I get that, and I appreciate that.
you have to also understand that you are the owner of the property, right? So you as the owner of the property, and I don't mean to be blunt or sort of, you are the owner of the property, right? Seeking to do something with the property that is completely within your right to do, right? But you have to own that process as owner of the property, right? And so, like, it's not, as Rich says, like, I can see both sides of it, but it's not we can't as a board, like.
Once you've done really, pretty much once the board has done its memorialization, we lose jurisdiction over the matter.
Right, like we laid it all out, we agreed, right? And so even if like on, you know, after the meeting, there were things in the resolution that you were uncomfortable with, or your professionals were uncomfortable with, that would have been an opportunity to then say, look, we can't sign this, or we can't, and then it would come back before us and we would then debate it some more. But it's like, we're in sort of a bad place here, but the point that I want to make though is like, it is within your right to subdivide the property, but that subdivision comes with certain requirements that the board, you know, that we all agreed to, right? And so as the owner of the property though, you've gotta drive that process as the owner.
And that's what I've been trying to do, respectfully, that's what I've been trying to do. I've been trying to do it using the professionals where they absolutely need to be used, because I can't just be required to just, like, I noticed when we were just talking about, and the councilman had just presented the other projects, right? We just glanced over several $100,000 issues like it was no big deal. Like with the drainage and stuff like that. And like for me, I am not the town, I can't just pull from all these places. So like I need to be able to your point, manage my own project, own it, I'm doing it 100%. I don't sleep at night because this is all I think about. This is all I think about. I can't even sleep at night. And so a surprise 2,000, 5,000, it's to death 5,000 cuts. And that's the problem. Is like I would love to just pay the professionals to be here. And I've done everything that needs to be done from an engineering standpoint, but now, and I tried to just agree to everything that the board had, that we had ratified, that you had ratified. Because I just didn't want to go against the grain. I was so happy that the house was going to remain. And then what's happening is just like the reality of this is just, it's insane. It's like the requests are just, especially with regard to the house. And I understand if I was knocking the house down, I'd be required to manage drainage and all that stuff. I get that. But this house sits on a lot that, you know, no changes are being made to that portion of the lot, and it conforms to the minimum size standard for an existing. So we're not going to other people's properties and ripping out their yard to put a massive dry well, and we're not doing that. So like, why should I have to do it? At first I just agreed, but like the reality is just, it's crazy. It's just totally crazy. So I appreciate your time. And
The only other thing I want to add is, and you kind of said it, you try to use your professionals only as needed. And although that is a cost savings, as licensed professionals and you're a professional for the board, we typically deal with the professionals directly, the applicant's professionals. They submit, they make all the submittals, everything gets a cover letter, everything is, you know, logged in accordingly based on, you know, what the resolution says. On technical matters, this is the first time I'm hearing of these types of things where. Although administratively, we don't have the right to waive those types of things in the original design. We haven't even had that conversation with your engineer, and. That's where I even said, I don't know if I directly said it in the email, but I know Sheila and I, we had spoke about it because the question came up, what is required for you to request the extension? The board needs enough information so they know what they're reviewing prior to the meeting, so they understand what you're asking for.
I understand.
And the ordinance spells out the reasons why you need an extension of time. It could be, you know, you didn't get your Two Rivers sewer letter until a certain date, or you're waiting for this approval, or whatever the case, or.
But if I just had a little bit of correspondence from the town to say, if I just had that literally a month earlier, because I was getting a lot of stuff together and I didn't know. Like when the letter came back, I was like, well, you didn't submit it in the paper. Yes, I did, and I could prove that. I got all the letters lined up. All I needed was, you know, just a little bit of.
But that's why
this
even in
is
the
where we're at.
email, I had recommended, I said, both the attorneys, our attorney and your attorney are copied, they could have a discussion on what's required to come for the extension. Based on.
I guess my question is, does my attorney need to be here to request a simple extension? I can fill out.
You can represent yourself pro se, but before you do that, again, I'm giving you all the disclaimers are before. I don't know what you're gonna ask for.
I'm just gonna ask. for-
No, I'm just saying, I don't know what you're gonna ask
I
for.
understand.
So it's difficult for me on a hypothetical to say, yeah, you don't need your professional. If you're asking for something like, and again, it can be very technical. You know, if you're looking, you know, I don't want to put in a dry well when it was recommended, you know, we're gonna ask our engineer, you know, what does it, you know, do we need the dry well? Do we need something to capture from roof gutter? I mean, I'm gonna tell you, just about every application, this is the planning board, but just about every application that comes before the zoning board of adjustment. Right now, because of different conditions in different neighborhoods, people are encouraged to put in, you know, a dry well, even if they're doing an addition to capture things off of, you know, gutters and leaders to go in where they can. And that's not on you. That's the way in which our land is in the borough of Fairhaven. We have areas that just get soaking wet, and a minor development here or increase in impervious coverage, it might be easier to capture it in a dry well on yours because of the house next door, because you own both. It might just simply be easier to do that. I don't know that. And quite frankly, even if you gave me all that information, I'd go, here, Mr. Gardella, tell me what to do.
Yeah, but even Mr.
And I mean-
Gardella needs it ahead of time, so
Yeah.
I can at least open with.
Yeah, my purpose here was
I got you.
Yeah, my purpose here is just to lay it out and just say, can you please give me some guidance? I'll fill out the application, I'll come back, that's fine. It really didn't sit well.
But as
with
a-
us.
I encourage you. Have your counsel, give me a call. Take the application to the extent that, there's a section that's waive, what, you wanna waive a bunch of
But if
things?
we have a
Fine. In
resolution
some we can, in some we won't be able
Resolution
to.
of approval with conditions, do we have to amend this resolution?
You would not be, you would ask for an amended resolution, that's what you're gonna ultimately do. I would encourage you to staple your past resolution of approval, that'll get us started in the right direction. And if you're going to ask for certain waivers of those things, you know, be clear and concise as to what you're doing. People come and represent themselves all the time. That's good and that's bad. If they're really good and it's not, and it's relatively straightforward, we have had people come in and say, look, I just didn't get it done. I'd like an extension time. And we say to them, how much more time do you need? And they say 2 months, and we give them 6. Okay, you seem like a nice fellow. I don't want to see you again. Until, you know, you don't want to see me again. You don't want to see me again. I don't blame you. But I'd like to, as I said, like to fix the problem. If I have that, paper gets thrown, it gets put onto Mr. Cardella's desk, he'll take a look at those things. If he needs additional calculations or something like that, there's going to be a request for them. That's where it gets sticky, if you're gonna ask to have something undone. People come and ask for an amended resolution of approval on a regular basis. It goes fairly
The
quickly.
extension by itself doesn't need, an amended resolution, the extension, just appears.
We will do, no, an extension by itself will require a resolution because we're gonna change the time. We're gonna give a rationale based upon the statutory criteria as to why you're entitled to that. We will find, if it fits, we will find a basis to do that, and that's what we'll be granted on.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I would like to, any other comments, any other public comment? Should we adjourn?
Do you want to discuss this further? If you want to discuss this further and get the benefit of my counsel, I'd ask that you go into an executive session.
I think that's probably a good idea.
If we're gonna go into executive session, I don't think we're gonna take any further action, other than let me frame the following motion for someone to move and second. Whereas under the Open Public Meetings Act, there are certain matters that can go into closed executive session to the exclusion of the public, at which point those matters will remain confidential until such time as the need for confidentiality is no longer required. In this instance, we will be going into executive session, presumably to discuss the matters we just heard and receive my counsel, which is one of those matters that can go into a closed executive session. I anticipate that we will go into executive session for how long?
20 minutes.
20 minutes. We will not take any further action publicly other than to adjourn the meeting after that 20 minutes. May I ask for a motion?
So moved.
May I ask for a second?
Second.
Do you have that recorded, Ms. Olson?
Yes.
Okay.
Well done.
Folks, we're gonna go into closed session. That's all. That's
Thank you.
all for this evening.
Someone's on the phone.
Yeah, but
Oh.
they don't have raised hand.
Oh.
They're not making comment, they're just listening.
Are we taking
Okay.
comments? Did we-
I'm sorry, if somebody wants to make.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, sorry.
I'll try to ask.
Well, I can ask the whole, I can ask that.
I didn't
motion to
realize there was
stay.
somebody up there.
Okay, I can ask that motion to be stayed. Who made the motion? Who seconded? So we'll ask that motion to be stayed at this point in time. They will now still remain in public session. Let's take the public comment.
Well, we have none.
No, there's no.
Oh, they're gone.
They're there, but they don't.
Raised hand.
just to
Oh, I
add.
thought she said that was a raised. I'm sorry.
That raised hand. Okay, good, we're close.
Sorry.
It's good practice. No, we gotta do it all over.
No, that's fine.
Never mind.
And do what we just undid.
So I stopped recording now.
Yeah.
So we're in executive session, just
Wait for that to die. I'm still listening. Who's not?
Can we stop recording?